Time travel is pretty common in fiction. It's used in movies, video games, and even books. And with a plot device so complicated, it's bound to come with rules. One of those rules is that time travel is that you cannot, under any circumstances, change the past. Doing so will result in horrific damage to the space-time continuum. But sometimes, the person trying to change history may be doing so with good intentions. And in that case, it just makes the lesson even harder to learn. After the success of Marco Polo, John Lucarotti was asked to come back to direct another story. This time Lucarotti decided to base the story on the Aztecs, as he was fascinated by their culture, especially their human sacrifices. Also returning was John Crockett in the director's chair, having directed an episode of Marco Polo. Both set designer Barry Newbury and costume designer Daphne Dare both struggled with the accurately portraying Aztec times with a limited BBC budget and studios. Information on the Aztecs were limited at the time, so when it came to designing the sets, Newbury had to research books at the BBC. Newbury has stated that the Aztecs was the hardest Doctor Who story he ever worked on. But that hard work very much paid off, as the sets in the story were praised for detail and atmosphere. So let's get into the story. Part 1, titled The Temple of Evil, starts with the TARDIS landing inside a tomb. When Barbara and Susan come out, they identify the tomb as Aztec and reckon they're back on Earth. While Susan goes back to the ship to get the Doctor, Barbara goes through the doorway, which closes behind her. She is then confronted by the Aztec High Priest, Ortlok, who arrests her for being in the temple of the goddess Yetaxa. When the others come in after some time looking for Barbara, they are also met with Ortlok, but he seems to be in a better mood. He calls them servants of Yetaxa and goes to take them to her. On the way there they meet this guy. That was rude of you, Susan. This is Clotoxel, who is the High Priest of Sacrifice. They meet Yetaxa, who we see as Barbara, and who, because she was wearing the bracelet she found in the tomb, has now been mistaken for the goddess. The Doctor says that with the Aztecs fooled into believing that they're holy, they can now walk around freely and look for a way back into the tomb with a TARDIS in it, as it can only be opened from the inside. But now Barbara will have to keep up this act or they will all be killed.
If the Aztecs decide you're not what you're supposed to be, then we shall all die.
No pressure. Ortlok and Clotoxel tell Barbara that she's going to have to make an appearance at the ceremony today. Clotoxel already seems to have suspicions on Barbara's holiness. Ian is sent to go train with the head warrior, whilst the Doctor is sent to relax in the Garden of Old People. The lead warrior Ixta shows off his ability to Ian. They see Ian is going to have to prepare for the upcoming rain ceremony and that there will be a human sacrifice. In the Garden of Geezers, the Doctor meets an old woman called Kameka, and they get on well. She says she knew the man who built the temple and that she can arrange for the Doctor to have a meeting with his son. Just then, Ian comes in dressed like a chicken, and when Kameka leaves, he tells the Doctor that he's going to have to escort the victim who's going to be executed. The Doctor goes to tell Barbara what's happening. He tells her that she cannot do anything to stop this, as it would disrupt Aztec culture. Barbara says that she wants to change the Aztecs, because then, if all the bad sides of their culture are snuffed out, then only the good and beautiful parts will remain when Cortez lands. The Doctor is shocked by this, and tells her that she cannot change history.
What you are trying to do is utterly impossible. I know. Believe me, I know.
But she shuts him down.
Not Barbara. Yetaxa.
Outside the temple, they're preparing to sacrifice the victim, but Susan runs out just before it happens. The would-be victim is angry that his honor was ruined and jumps off the wall, causing it to rain. Clotoxel wants to punish Susan, but he is forbidden by Barbara. This is what finally convinces him that she is a fraud.
No, this is not Yetaxa. This is a false goddess!
Part 2, The Warriors of Death, sees the Doctor chewing out Barbara for going against his words. When they've calmed down, they realise that Kotoxal is now their enemy and they must be wary of him. While training with Ixta, Ian manages to take him down with just his thumb on his neck. Kotoxal comes in to see his champion passed out on the table, and Ortlok declares Ian the new head warrior. Kotoxal and Ixta then plan for there to be a second battle, where they plan to kill Ian. Back in the Garden of Geezers, the Doctor continues to rizz up Kameka so that she can arrange a meeting with the Builder's son. Kameka goes to the Builder's son, who turns out is Ixta, and tells him that the Doctor would like to meet up with him. He agrees to, and plans to use the Doctor to find a way to destroy Ian. We see Susan learning the ways of the Aztec housewife, and she gives her views on it.
I'm not going to be told who to marry.
What say have you in the matter?
What's my life? I'll spend it with whom I choose, not someone picked out for me.
Second wave feminism, circa 1430. The Doctor meets with Ixta in the garden, where they agree to help each other. The Doctor gives Ixta a thorn with poison on it, which will paralyze his opponent, without realizing that it's Ian he's fighting. The Doctor goes to tell Barbara the information he'll soon get and how he helped Ixta. Barbara tells him that it's Ian that he's fighting. As the fight begins, Ian absolutely cleans the floor with Ixta, which sort of brings up the question of how a science teacher became such a good fighter. Maybe he also taught PE. Anyway, Ixta is getting owned when he decides to use the thorn on Ian, but not before the Doctor tries to warn him.
Here, don't let him scratch you! What?
Oh, that was helpful. Now drugged, Ian struggles to stand, but is still somehow holding his own. Ixta eventually gets the upper hand, and Barbara comes in to stop the fight. Part 3, The Bride of Sacrifice, sees Barbara holding a knife to Kotoxal's throat, forcing Ixta to let Ian go. Ian wakes up to see Ixta standing over him, acting all chummy. Then Kotoxal walks in.
Has been restored to you.
Don't tell me you're my friend now.
Ixta.
Ixta tells Ian that the Doctor gave him the thorn that he used on him in return for his father's drawings of the temple, but he says that there are no such drawings and that he tricked the Doctor. With just Kotoxal and another priest, Tanilla, we see them planning to poison Barbara to prove if she is a goddess, but not without Ian hearing. Ian goes to warn Barbara. They argue over whether the Aztecs can be changed, and Barbara says that if the few bad apples like Kotoxal were cut out of the culture, then it would thrive. But Ian tells her that the majority of the Aztecs side with Kotoxal's beliefs, and that it's Ortlok who is the exception. Just then, Kotoxal and Tanilla come in with a drink for Barbara to show that they are sorry. Behind them, Ian warns Barbara that it's poison, so she asks Kotoxal to drink it first, and when he doesn't, she yells at them to leave. Tanilla runs away with wet trousers, and Barbara confronts Kotoxal, finally telling him that she is a fake and that there's nothing she can do because everyone believes that she is a goddess. Back in the garden, the Doctor shares a drink of cocoa with Kameka and is given the big news.
You have declared your love for me, and I acknowledge and accept your gentle proposal.
Kotoxal is moping around, trying to think of a new way to get back at Barbara. When he hears about Susan's little feminist outburst, he starts to formulate a plan. Back at Susan's lessons, Tanilla and the perfect victim come by. Because the perfect victim is to be sacrificed at the eclipse, it means that any of his requests must be fulfilled. He says that he wants Susan as his bride, but she refuses, insulting him, and she is to be punished. Ortlok says that he'll do everything to lessen her punishment, but Susan isn't having it. Well, that's just mean. He's trying to help you.
Whatever's in my power, I shall do.
You're monsters. All of you monsters.
Kotoxal informs Barbara that someone is going to be punished for going against their teachings, and at first Barbara is against the idea, but reluctantly agrees, without knowing that it's Susan who is to be punished. The Doctor tells Ian that he's figured out that there's a tunnel in the garden that leads to the tomb. He also goes to tell him that he's gotten engaged.
Where did you get hold of this?
My fiancée.
I see. You're what?
At night, Ian and Ixta are sleeping together. Not like that. And Ian sneaks away. Ixta follows him. He meets up with the Doctor in the garden, and they open the secret tunnel and Ian goes in. Ixta then shows up and asks the doctor what he's doing, and he puts the stone cover back on the tunnel, saying that the water from the river flows down it. Ian is now trapped inside, with the water starting to fill up. Part 4, The Day of Darkness, sees Ian finding a hatch leading out of the secret tunnel. The hatch leads Ian back inside the chamber with a TARDIS in it. Before opening the door to get out, he ties a rope around the handle so they can pull it from the outside. He goes through the door and meets up with Barbara and the doctor, who has been worrying about him. They now plan to leave, but they need to go get Susan, who's being held under guard, waiting to be punished. Ian goes to save her. Ixta is the one holding her hostage, and he believes that Ian is dead. He shows up behind them and knocks Ixta out. While waiting for Ian and Susan to get back, Barbara says that she's done trying to rewrite history. Once the others arrive, they waste no time in trying to get the door open, but it seems like it's too heavy. When Klatoxel finds out what happens, he comes up with a new plan to frame Ian for attacking Ortlock. In the secret garden, Ian and Susan are trying to enter the tomb from the secret tunnel to let the others in, when they find Ortlock knocked out in the bushes with Ian's weapon next to him. The guards arrive and arrest Ian for attacking Ortlock, and Ortlock is now convinced that Barbara isn't a goddess. Klatoxel and Tallulah now plan to kill off Barbara at the upcoming eclipse. In the garden, the doctor is carving a wheel to use as a pulley for the door. Alone, Barbara convinces Ortlock that Ian wasn't the one who attacked him, but there's nothing he can do now. The doctor has finally finished his wheel, and Kameka has become aware that he is leaving, and while she is upset, she accepts it. In the bushes, she meets with Ortlock, who has decided to run away into the jungle, but before doing so, decides to give his priest bling to her. As they prepare for the sacrifice, Ian and Susan are being held hostage when Kameka comes in and bribes the guard with the bling she got from Ortlock to let them go, but Ian just knocks him out. Man, why is Ian just like this super soldier of a man who can beat everyone in a fight? I thought he was just a teacher. Ian and Susan make it back to the others to leave. Klatoxel sees them leaving and calls for Ixta, and so commences the final epic battle between the two warriors. While they're fighting, the others are trying to get the door open. Ixta gets the upper hand, but Ian flips him over. They then get the door open and escape. Klatoxel doesn't even bother trying to go after them and goes ahead with the sacrifice. Outside the TARDIS, Barbara is feeling stupid for ever thinking she could change the Aztecs, but the doctor gives her some words of comfort.
That's the good you've done. You failed to save a civilization, but at least you helped one man.
She goes into the TARDIS, and, all alone, the doctor leaves the brooch Kameka gave him, and goes to leave, but sometime later, the TARDIS lands somewhere new, but something is not right.
The mystery, my boy.
What sort of mystery?
My instruments.
Yes, according to these controls here, we've stopped.
Yes, and those instruments say that they're still moving.
Perhaps we've landed on top of something.
Yes.
Or inside something.
The Aztecs gives us a lot to talk about. Firstly, the sets and the overall design of this story is great. The temple, the garden, and even the fake backdrop really helps to create a sense of scale, even if it is a bit crappy looking. The costumes are also all great for all the Aztecs. I particularly love the feathers everyone has. Ian's chicken costume is also very funny. Comparing this to Marco Polo, it really shows how actually seeing the actors interacting with the sets creates a much more believable story. Another great thing about this is the main villain, Klatoxel, who, in all honesty, didn't really do anything wrong. I mean, yeah, he tried to kill Barbara and Ian, and he is the #1 believer of the human sacrifices, but really, all he's trying to do is prove that Barbara is a fake, which she is. Can we really blame him for wanting to expose someone who's manipulating his culture and religion for their own interests? And speaking of that interest, Barbara is the main focus of this story, and her arc of learning not to meddle with history is compelling. The fact that her actions on the surface are noble, wanting to save the Aztecs from their fate, is nice. And she keeps it going for quite a while. Being a history teacher makes it a hell of a lot easier for her to pretend to be a goddess. The thing is, her actions are wrong. Not just because she tries to meddle with time, but because she tried to mess with an entire culture. Her trying to save the Aztecs and change their ways of human sacrificing is null and void, because that is who the Aztecs are. That's their religion. Even the victims who are being sacrificed in this story want it to happen, as they see it as a moment of honor. She's trying to save people who don't want to be saved. Take for instance that Kotoxel makes it to the end of the story without any sort of comeuppance. It's to drive home how futile Barbara's efforts were to change them. That no matter what, the Aztecs will remain who they are. But Barbara's efforts weren't entirely amiss. As the Doctor said, she couldn't save a civilization, but she could save one man. Speaking of the Doctor, I want to end with his part of the story, mainly his relationship with Kameka. Seeing the Doctor fall in love was not something I expected to see. Well, at least not until David Tennant came on screen. And the Doctor unintentionally getting engaged was very funny, but it soon becomes heartfelt when he has to leave. The way they would flirt with each other was cute, and I really did feel bad for Kameka for losing her love. Whether or not the Doctor truly felt the same way about her, I couldn't say. But he did, without a doubt, care about her. Enough so to keep the gift that she gave him. This scene is the first time we see the Doctor completely alone, so we get to see a more vulnerable side to him as he goes to pick up her brooch with a look on his face, almost as if he's annoyed at himself for feeling this way. It's a very poignant moment, and our first closer look at this character that we will very slowly get to know more about. So overall, The Aztecs was a fun, interesting, and thought-provoking romp around ancient history, and I'll be giving it a solid 9 out of 10. So, join me as we take a trip to the mysterious and unknown corners of the galaxy, filled with odd creatures who you can never be sure of are either friend or foe, as we watch The Sensorites, next time on Doctor Who Digest. See you then.